Here's my honest Bowers & Wilkins Px8 review and whether they're still worth it in 2025. Let's find out. Alright, so today we have the Bowers & Wilkins Px8, and I've reviewed the rest of the Bowers & Wilkins current lineup, including the new Px7S3. Now, I wrote this review a while ago, but we're revisiting the Px8 in a video format, and I think it's good timing because we've reviewed over 30 wireless active noise cancelling headphones, so we have quite a good perspective now and can give a more accurate score than ever. So let's start by talking about the comfort. The Px8 weighed in at just over 320 grams on my scale, which is on the heavier side for this class of headphones. That said, I do find the Px8 to be one of the most comfortable headphones that I've tested. They have ample space inside of the ear cups, so my ear cups are free. They have nice ear pad cushioning and a nice headband. The only problem with these is that they are on that heavier side. So to me, the comfort is not as elite as something like the Bose QC Ultra, which weighs in at just 254 grams on the same scale. But overall for comfort, I give the Px8 a 4.5 out of 5. I could see some people giving these a perfect 5 out of 5, and I wouldn't argue with you. Now let's talk about features, build quality, battery life, and noise cancelling performance, which we'll combine into a single score. The first thing I want to highlight is the premium hardshell case that you do get with them. It is on the larger side, and it's pretty identical to the Px7S2e, the Px7S3. The only difference here is that you have this leather tag instead of the usual fabric. And inside you're going to get your typical USB-C to USB-C cable and a USB-C to stereo cable as well. These two cables are also featured on the other models. So regarding its features, the Px8 was released a while ago in September 2022. It has Bluetooth 5.2 with aptX adaptive, has your active noise cancelling transparency mode, ability to turn either of them off, and you do have that smartphone app with the ability to customize a very basic 2-band EQ, just bass and treble, and update the firmware. These also have multiple microphones for built-in calls, but other than that, these are pretty much your typical modern wireless noise cancelling headphone. So let's talk about the build quality, which I do want to highlight real quick. So there are mixed feelings and mixed reception about the build quality. Some people complain about the headband kind of peeling off and losing some of that adhesive, which I do believe that they updated at some point. At least that's what I heard online. And also some people were complaining about the earpad cushions. Perhaps they seem to wear down at an accelerated rate. Now, for me personally, I have not had those issues. I do think that the headband seems to be slightly peeling off, but for me, I don't really notice any issues with this pair of headphones. And personally, I actually think that the build quality of these is quite excellent. If you look here at the material that they use on the exterior of the ear cups and for the headband, you have this nice metal. You also have leather here on the exterior of the ear cups. You have leather here on the headband and on the exterior as well. You have these really nice premium ear pad cushions. To me, everything about the Px8 screams luxury and quality. I find these to be one of the best built wireless noise cancelling headphones today, and this is probably where some of that price tag comes into play. Now, moving on to the battery life, the Px8 is rated at a 30 hours of battery life on a single charge, which is around average, maybe slightly above average for the class. Moving on to the noise cancelling performance, I think this is one area where the Px8 could be improved with a newer model like the Px8S2, which is rumored to perhaps come out, whether it's later this year or next year. I think that the noise cancelling on the newer Px7S3 does take a step forward when it comes to the noise cancelling performance on the Px8 and on the previous Px7S2e. Overall, I think the noise cancelling can be pretty good depending on the environment and the certain frequencies that you're looking to filter out. But personally, I don't think it's on the level of the elite options like the Sony XM6, the Bose QC Ultra, the Sonos Ace, and the Px7S3, as I mentioned. So honestly, I think the noise cancelling really is something that could be improved. So overall, for features, build quality, battery life, noise cancelling performance, I give these a 4.5 out of 5 with a little bit of room for improvement. All right, so let's talk about the sound quality, which is honestly, I think the biggest point of contention and controversy about these headphones online, I've read really mixed reviews of people loving this headphone, hating this headphone, and I think I know why these are so polarizing, okay? So starting with my personal first impressions, I get why people don't like this headphone, because when I first started listening to this headphone, I actually thought they were malfunctioning. I thought that there was something wrong with it, and to be honest, I think it really boils down to two things. So one, the stock sound profile. To describe it is it's going to sound pretty muffled because it is a warm, lush, dark sound signature that it's not quite neutral, but it's also definitely not consumer friendly where, we're pushing forward the bass and the treble. We're actually pushing forward the mids, which is kind of unique for the consumer class of headphones. Maybe something like the Sennheiser wired headphones has a similar sound signature, but done better, to be honest with you. But the PX8, to me, what I was hearing at first was, I was finding the sub bass to be completely lacking, almost like bassless. And then you do have this irregular bump in the upper bass and lower mids, which is creating this muffled and overall just kind of wonky sound signature in a way, because really that upper bass bump, it gives this impression that these have a lot of bass. But again, the sub bass and the sub bass slam specifically was really lacking, especially out of the box. Now, my second point that I want to bring up, other than that stock sound profile, which I think is really tuned in a way that's very opinionated, and unfortunately, I think like 50% or more of consumers are not going to love that sound signature that I just described, okay? Because that sound signature, it works mostly for older music, and I would say if you're seeking realistic timbre and warmth as opposed to critical listening and details in the treble, and also for me, the modern music and having that sub bass and having that low end is really lacking in these. Now, something happened when I listened to these past the 40 or 50 hour mark, which is my second point I want to bring up. I think what happened was that these earpad cushions started to loosen up and form a better seal. And I think that actually improved the bass response and kind of mellowed out the sound and made them a little bit more full and impactful, because I still remember the first time listening to these again, I thought they were broken because the bass was really lacking and there's just something wrong, honestly, with the sound. And, I came back from listening from all these other headphones before and then revisiting the PX8 now after having reviewed over 30 headphones. I will say that I do still like the PX8 sound signature because it is one of the most relaxing headphones that I've listened to. Now, that's not going to be everyone's cup of tea, including my own. My inherent preferred sound profile is going to be neutral bright. I like to do critical listening with my background as an audio engineer, a music producer. I'm usually listening for details. And so for me, these are not my preferred sound signature. That said, they're the most relaxing headphone and one of the more realistic timbre in this class that I've listened to for vocals, for instruments. So if that sounds like up your alley, maybe you listen to just older music, you listen to classical, you listen to jazz, these headphones can be very pleasing. And the other thing about them is that they have a very intimate sound stage that is not very wide. It's not very deep. Everything is kind of close. So if you're listening to jazz, for example, you kind of sound like you're right next to the musicians on stage. Like you're not actually sitting in the front row. You're not singing like a concert hall. You're on stage and you can hear everything right next to you. So that's up to you whether you like that or not. It can be flattering. It can be not as good, to be honest, as having that bigger, more spacious, expansive sound. But overall, these are a mixed bag. But for me, I've went from hating them, honestly, out of the box to liking them a lot, and now I've come back to like a mellowed out sort of stance where these again are the most relaxing headphone that I have listened to in this class. So if that's your cup of tea, then these can be very charming. Okay, now to give some quick sound impressions, PX7S3, way more consumer friendly, way more sub bass, way more treble detail. These are the literal polar opposite of the PX8 for good reason. I think they made this because they kind of wanted to fix all the things about the PX8 that consumers were complaining about. Again, the PX8 is a different line than the PX7, which is supposed to be more consumer friendly. It's cheaper, so it's kind of like in that class. that's more for maybe a younger demographic, honestly. But with the Px8 S2, I really think they can improve things, because the truth is, I think the Px8 has really decent hardware, but it's hamstrung by its stock tuning, which is not for everybody, like I mentioned. And the EQ is next to useless, okay? They have a 2-band EQ versus a 5-band EQ on the S3. And the S3's EQ actually does do its job, but it's still limited. They still put some training wheels that doesn't let you fully just tamper with the sound too much, okay? The Px8 has that 2-band EQ with just the bass and the treble, and honestly, they put the bass in the wrong sort of frequency and implementation. It's like a bass shelf that completely erases your sub bass. So if you want to kind of like tame things and reel them in, don't really count on that EQ doing much, because for me, it's borderline useless, honestly. So those are the things that are hamstringing the Px8, because it has good hardware. I can hear it. When you listen to these headphones in wired mode, they will impress most people, including myself. I like listening to these in wired mode. Okay, they sound much better. But unfortunately, these are wireless headphones, and because of that lack of EQ and the flexibility, we're stuck with that sound profile that's very polarizing, very opinionated. Okay, now the S3, much more consumer friendly, much more fun. Now, bringing over the Focal Batiste, the Batiste to me is just a much more engaging and a much more balanced headphone than the Px8 when it comes to its tonality. Okay, tonality is nailed pretty well on the Batiste, although I have found that EQing these can bring them out a little bit better. They can sound a little muffled depending, but overall they have even more soundstage and spaciousness, and honestly just balance between bass, mids, and treble than the Px8. I put these in a tier above the Px8, maybe half a step above. Now let's bring up the Bang & Olufsen H95, which is an interesting headphone, also in that high-end tier, these costing a bit more. The H95 is very similar to the Px7S3. V-shaped, bass, treble forward. It's the complete opposite of the Px8, which is warm, it's lush, it's a little darker. The H95 is a bit bright to the point of being a little shrill and, just a little peaky in the treble, but having tons of resolution, being one of the most resolving headphones in this class. Okay, so there you have it. I hope that I was able to describe what the Px8 sounds like. Overall, the Px8 is a mixed bag. I like them, honestly. I've gone from hating them to almost loving them. I don't really want to say loving, because for me, they're not my preference for sound profile, but I sit at a place where they have their place. They are a very relaxing headphone if you just want to lay down, listen to probably not the most modern music, and just relax. I don't think there's a better headphone for that case, but if that's not you, if you like critical listening, hearing the details like me, then these are probably not the choice for you. So overall for sound quality, I give these an 8.9 out of 10. Good hardware, good drivers underneath the hood, but lacking flexibility with EQ, and having a very opinionated tuning is going to make these a mixed bag. Okay, but if what I described you may love, then you'll love these. But if that doesn't sound like your cup of tea, avoid the Px8. Now, moving on to value. Okay, this is where things get interesting. These days, thankfully, the Px8 has dropped down in price significantly, and there's rumors that Px8 S2 is on the horizon. It hasn't been announced at the time of this video, so this is still for sale. It's being manufactured. It's still a current model, but they did introduce the Px7 S3 a couple months ago. Okay, so the S2 is probably overdue at this point, at least to be announced. I think considering the quality of these, they are definitely worth. These are very high quality headphones that, again, I personally like these headphones a lot these days. Okay, they have their place, and it depends on my mood, but these are one of my more favorite headphones that I've tested. Now, regarding the price and the value, overall, I do think these are worth it. And as you get lower and lower, the value score goes up. But overall, I give these a 4 out of 5 for value. I think they're worth it. They are really high quality build quality. So to me, they scream luxury, and they really are a wonderful product. But honestly, they're getting a little bit old as far as the noise canceling technology, and sound quality wise, there are some incredible values these days. Just like the Cambridge Audio Melomania P100, which just released an SE edition. So they just updated this that was already great, and honestly a bit better sound quality than the Px8 as a whole, with a better EQ and everything. Overall, the Px8 receives an 8.8 out of 10. So a solid overall headphone that scores pretty well on paper, and subjectively, I do like these headphones. I would consider this headphone as my pick for a headphone that can do it all. And if I had to just only choose one of these headphones to spend my money to keep and to only have one and not be able to switch, and have like 2 or 3 models, the Px8 is in the running, I'll say. I probably would prefer the newer Px7S3 because of how it sounds, not only out of the box, but with a 5-band EQ, I'm able to balance them out even further. And I think sound quality wise, technical sound quality wise, these are on par with each other, which is kind of disappointing for the Px8, because if it just had more flexibility with the EQ, then honestly, who knows? Maybe it could be equal to the Px7S3, if not better. So we'll never know. But for the money, with the slightly improved noise canceling as well on the Px7S3, I'd probably swing towards the Px7S3, but with the sales that we're seeing, sometimes going below, the Px8 is starting to look like an incredible value, considering that, if you can find on sale or even used in like new condition, which that's where I think these become a smoking value and deal, especially if that sound signature, it's something that floats your boat and is up your alley. Okay.